Hey, I'm EV2Easy, and today I'm gonna rank all 24 weapons in Monster Madness Battle for Suburbia. This list is gonna assume all weapons are at level 3, so crafting expenses won't be factored in. This list is also solely based off of my opinions and experience with the game, so your placements may differ from mine. Here, we'll be ranking all the weapons with the standard S to F tier list. The placement of the tiers from left to right do not matter. I'll be explaining the pros and cons of each weapon and what makes them weak or strong, case by case. Now that we've gone over how it works, let's start off strong with the Nailguns, which are a very solid and iconic weapon, as they are often the first gun the player makes. They embody the saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none." Because of this, they lack major upsides, but also lack major downsides. They have respectable damage, good fire rate, lightweight, and also have a quick reload and can very easily carry you through all of Madness if it's the only weapon you have. The only notable downside they have is that the 30 shot clip is not enough for the fire rate, so you'll often be reloading. Thankfully, you can mostly offset this downside by abusing the instant reload glitch, but it's still annoying to have to constantly do it. Overall, very solid and iconic. You can't go wrong with this. A tier. The pipe shotgun is a pretty alright weapon. In my playing, it's surprisingly solid, but definitely has some glaring flaws holding it back. Starting with the pros, it does great burst damage, has surprisingly good range for a shotgun, and is amazing at taking down lower tier enemies in one shots. And it also sports a very good fire rate. While these are good upsides to have, it has far more severe downsides. At ranges outside of near point blank, it can have inconsistent damage and sometimes can't kill monsters which very easily be able to one-shot. Despite being a shotgun, it has very poor crowd control. This is because the weapon fires in a cone shape, the middle bullets doing the most damage while everything else is pretty negligible. Because of this, it rarely kills more than one monster at a time. And the most damaging flaw in my opinion is that it can't take advantage of the instant reload glitch. All other weapons use a clip reload the entire thing, while the shotgun puts them in at intervals at 5. Because of this, the instant reload glitch won't work, and the shotgun has a pretty long reload, leaving you with no way to subsidize this. It's overall solid, but only good for killing things you can already easily kill. But it's still pretty fun to use. C tier. The cell phone taser is incredibly mediocre. It works by charging an electric shot. Once it's released, if it hits an enemy, it'll deal damage over a period of a few seconds, and the main gimmick is that it can chain to many enemies if they are close by, dealing more damage if the shot is chained rather than if it only hits one monster. The damage is actually pretty good and has amazing crowd control capabilities. Unlike other charged shots in video games, you can charge it as long as you want and you are fully mobile while charging even when the shot is released. The chain shot makes incredibly easy work of lower health enemies and is indecently ammo efficient. It's also incredibly lenient, as if another enemy comes close while the shot is active, it'll automatically chain to them. The weapon being lightweight also helps, as you can run to a monster to forcefully chain the shot to them. However, there are some harrowing downsides to this weapon. As with other low tier weapons, it excels in killing lower health enemies which you already don't need help with killing thanks to the high tier weapons. This weapon is an unfortunate case of being a one-trick pony, as although it has amazing crowd control, the high-tier weapons can do that just as well, among other things, while this is only good at crowd control and nothing else. You can also get a glitch which renders the weapon completely unusable until you reset the last checkpoint, which happened to me in my recordings. Unfortunately, it's powercraft and just a one-trick pony. C tier. The rocket launcher is a surprisingly awful weapon. It shoots a projectile that explodes upon contact of anything. It has decent damage, a fast fire rate, and deals splash damage, leading to decent crowd control. I originally thought it was pretty good, but after playing with it a little, I find it is absolutely awful. The problems aren't with the damage dealt, but mostly with the self-inflicted splash damage it can, and absolutely will, do to you. Just using this weapon will often lead to you killing yourself or doing more damage to yourself rather than you do to the monsters. Obviously, you shouldn't use it in close quarters, but the problem is that many of the levels in the game take place in close quarters. There are also a lot of quick or close range enemies that really like to get in your face and take a rocket right in front of you, leaving you to damage yourself and leaving you with low chances to use the weapon. It also has a pretty long reload, leading to reliance on the instant reload glitch. Although most clip weapons do rely on the glitch, the reward you get for this is not worth it whatsoever. If you need damage and crowd control, there's other and better options that won't make you kill yourself. C tier. The minigun is an absolute beast of a weapon. It works by having a very short windup, then shoots bullets and quickly builds up to the fastest fire rate in the game, comboed with the best damage in the game. If you stop shooting over a short period of time, it will lose its fire rate and revert to a neutral state. This weapon is an absolute machine that shreds through quite literally every monster in the game. Besides bosses, this can kill every monster in 3 seconds and up to 5 seconds of sustained fire for the tankier enemies. It is absolutely the most efficient boss killer in the game, shredding every single boss in the game in less than 20 seconds. The weapon also has built-in crowd control, as you'll likely kill the crowd by just spraying into them without needing to sacrifice damage or health with a weapon that specializes in crowd control. Although a lot of people like to say it chews up ammo, as you only get a maximum of 3.5 mags on Thriller and just 3 on Horror, I disagree. As it has such a high DPS, you'll likely kill and clear the entire Monster Fest before you run out of ammo. Ammo is also obscenely abundant in this game, as there's pickups and ammo machines everywhere, so you really should not have problems with ammo. As is universal with other bullet weapons, it's hit scan, so you can snipe with it from the entire level's length as long as you have a clear shot. It is also fundamentally broken, as it has a glitch where if you put your back to the wall, fire the minigun and jump, you gain a lot of height. This alone lets you skip a few sections of the game, but if you combine this with another item, the bouncy shoes, you can skip entire levels of the game. So what cons does this beast of a gun have? Well, it's heavy, so you aren't very mobile. It also sports a very long reload, one of the longest in the game, in fact, which is meant to reset it to the neutral state. If you do the instant reload glitch, you will bypass this, essentially having a machine of death that never needs to take a break. Of course, it has the wind up before it really gets going, but that doesn't last very long, and taking just a tiny bit of damage in order to wind it up is more than worth it. Really, those are the only cons the gun has. It's very worthy of the classification of a power weapon. S tier. The Flamethrower is a far cry from the power of the minigun. This works by shooting a very long stream of flame that engulfs all monsters in fire immediately. The stream itself does low damage, the fire accounting for most of the damage output this weapon can do. It's very underwhelming and only really being good at killing low health monsters. Again, as is the problem with most low tier weapons, it has amazing crowd control, but only on monsters that you don't need a weapon specializing in crowd control to kill. Although ammo is mostly not a problem in this game, this gun absolutely chews through ammo. Finishing one Monster Fest often leaves you with no ammo or not even having enough to finish the fest. Also, you yourself can get engulfed in flames, which may cause the bugged fire glitch, which is a glitch where fire can sometimes kill you in seconds and be unable to be put out. Just to add insult to injury, some monsters are straight up immune to fire. Overall, it's just a gimmick weapon, and gimmick weapons are never good. F tier. The grenade slingshot is one of the most clunky weapons in the game. It shoots 3 grenades which explode into smaller bomblets, which then explode again. It does alright damage, has a very fast fire rate, and very fast reload. In fact, this reload is so fast you don't really have to use the instant reload glitch. Obviously, it's an explosive weapon, so it has good crowd control, and unlike others, can be used for more powerful enemies rather than lower tier enemies. It's lighter than the rocket launcher, and it's incredibly ammo efficient, as it only uses 6 ammo to fire of its max damage. This lets you go long times without restocking for ammo. Now, that would be good if the weapon actually worked. The bombs don't explode on contact, and that is the biggest flaw of the weapon. This makes the damage very hard to actually get, and oftentimes even a direct shot will deal no damage. You have to stand very far away to shoot them, and hope the weapon actually works. The bomblets rarely hit any target, and the weapon is so obscenely inconsistent that it rarely works. If you can get it to work, it can serve its purpose, but why use this gun that doesn't work over other guns that are better and actually work? If you want crowd control, use anything else. F tier. The Sonic Shield. The Sonic Shield. It is the absolute worst weapon in the game. It has 3 upsides that can barely even be called upsides, and a mountain of downsides that make it so unbelievably gimmicky it's practically unusable, and a waste of a weapon slot. When the fire button is held, a big shield appears in front of the player. If any monster projectiles hit this shield, they are nullified or deflected. The upside to that, it doesn't consume ammo, and it can be used when you have no ammo. And that's about it. Now, the problem with this weapon, in my opinion, is that it completely contradicts the entire game. Monster Madness is designed to be a fast-paced, game filled with constant action. A weapon that tries to specialize in defense goes against that entirely. It encourages you to hunker down and wait for the monsters to attack first, which is not how the game should be played. This game, if I had to give one saying to it, it's the best defense is a good offense. Therefore, it will always be better to try to kill the monster before it ever throws a projectile at you, rather than you wait for it to be thrown while you sit there looking stupid. Besides, even while you have the shield out, what are you doing? Nothing's dying, the monsters are going to close in on you, more are probably spawning. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting there with a big fuck off shield. It has next to no combat capabilities and doesn't repel monsters, which would be a really nice upside to have, because obviously there's nothing stopping the monsters from just walking into your shield. And even the ones that do throw projectiles, they also have really good melee options like the samurai. Even if you think you can wait for them to come to you, it will always be better for you to go to the monsters to kill them instead. It also doesn't even help with retreating, as walking backwards with the shield is extremely slow, and it's always better to just run away and round a corner. If you try to back off with the shield, those monsters will be quicker than you, and they will catch up to you. At that point, you're just delaying the inevitable. The main and only combative thing it can do is fling destructible objects around. Now, if these objects do hit monsters, most of the time it will cause a physics kill, which will instantly kill them. This is the most powerful thing in the game. The physics are not to be messed with. The problem is, physics that you need to do this are only found in destructible objects. And besides level 1 and 2, those are completely absent from the game. Although ironically, the physics engine is what most of the marketing went to. It is completely absent. It's very hard to find any destructible objects in this game. Besides level 1 and 2, objects are pretty much non-existent. This leaves the shield with absolutely no way to fight back, and making it, in my opinion, the second most level-dependent weapon in the game. It's also medium weight, so yeah, that doesn't help anything at all. It's completely garbage and worthless. Do not craft it. F tier. The CD launcher is surprisingly a very good weapon and very viable. It shoots 3 projectiles that fly in a cone shape and ricochet off any walls and disappear upon contact with any monster. The way it works makes it actually good at crowd control, with good damage, which is something a lot of other weapons cannot say. And also, it doesn't deal massive amounts of damage to yourself like explosive weapons, making it instantly better. Now, I believe the power of this weapon does not lie in the ricochet. It lies in the close range damage this thing can do. Because of its insanely fast fire rate, if you have all 3 CDs hit one monster, you can shred through almost every monster in the game. Even bosses can be absolutely destroyed by this thing, which I did not expect to see during my playtime with it. And because the later half of the game takes place in mostly close quarters, you're always going to be benefiting with this playstyle. It also doesn't do too bad at mid-range, but further ranges can make those other CDs fall off, and all in all, impact your max damage potential. It also has a quick reload, which obviously it's surpassed by doing the instant reload glitch, but it's still nice to have if you can't get it off in time. However, because it's a ricochet weapon, you also might put your kill potential at chance, as you're just hoping a CD might ricochet and do the little bit of extra damage you need to secure a kill. The CDs also only bounce horizontally. If they hit the floor or the ceiling, they will instantly shatter. In my opinion, the weirdest downside this weapon has is that ricocheting CDs can actually damage the player. I have absolutely no idea why this would be in the game, but it's been in the game since 2006, so I don't know what they were doing over in South Peak, man. Now, this self-inflicted damage is nowhere near as fatal as explosive weapons like rocket launchers or grenade launcher. It's still very weird that there's a good chance you'll get punished for using the weapon as an... Also, there's a weird glitch where if you have a Jacko head on you, the weapon just ceases to work. The CDs will break immediately for no reason. It's very weird and actually pretty detrimental, as Jackos are very common in the game, so that situation happens a lot. The weapon also being heavyweight does not help any sort of these problems. It also hurts the playstyle of going in for max damage, since you need to do a little bit more effort to get in range. Overall, it can absolutely hold its own, but has some very weird and bizarre downsides that hurts its viability. But it's still definitely worth picking up and trying. B tier. The Defibrillator is a weapon that specializes in crowd control, finally done right. It is the absolute king of CC and doesn't have the similar downsides other crowd control weapons have. It works by charging it for a few seconds where it builds damage over a small period of time, indicated by a blue to yellow spark effect, then releases a huge spherical burst that goes through walls and puts you in an animation lock. Overcharging it, however, leads to you doing a massive amount of damage to yourself and stuns you. This weapon is definitely one of the weakest of the S tiers, but that still means it's one of the best in the game's arsenal. The charge doesn't take too long, and you are fully mobile while charging, so dodging around while you get in range for a max damage is definitely the main strategy here. The damage this weapon does is also absolutely insane. You can one-shot most monsters and do 70 to 90% of the tankier monster's health in one burst. The range is very good, as you can cover all or most of a Monster Fest arena in one max charge blast. The wall piercing is a very nice bonus, as you can stay completely safe from things like stuns or flying monsters while you charge for max damage and get a free kill. All this combined makes its crowd control the best in the game, as it can clear whole Monster Fest in 3 to 4 blasts. The monsters you need to worry about the most can and will be one-shot if they get hit by this, leading to most monsters becoming non-threats. The blast radius doesn't dictate damage. As long as the monster is in the sphere, they will take max damage. While the weapon is amazing, it does have downsides you need to take into mind. It is very ammo heavy, taking large chunks for just one blast. You're also very stun susceptible while charging. It's very common to get stunned out of your charge several times before you get to unleash one blast, especially on Madness. It being a medium weight weapon also makes it quite cumbersome to use. Weapon can also be very buggy to use. There's a very common bug that the blast is the minimum charge blast when you charged it to max damage. This can mean wasted ammo and potentially some damage that you're going to take because you're animation locked. I also want to mention now that I do not consider the overcharge damage to be a downside, as long as you aren't blackout drunk, you will be able to release it before you overcharge it, and it's not hard to memorize the overcharge times. In my opinion, it may feel unwieldy to use at times, but learning it and loving it will reward you greatly. It is an absolute staple in my loadout. S tier. The glue cannon is obscenely underwhelming and a far cry from the Defibrillator in the category of crowd control. It works by shooting puddles of glue, that's green for some reason, onto the floor. If any monster walks into it, they are completely immobilized as long as the glue is up. After a few seconds, the glue dissipates and any monster that's ensnared is released. The glue is also highly flammable and will burn if any fire comes into contact with it. The highlights are that it does alright damage and well, that's really about it for this gun. It's worse than every crowd control weapon in the game in every single regard. Extremely ammo hungry. If you go into a fest with less than max ammo, you will burn almost all of it just trying to keep the glue up long enough to get kills. The biggest flaw in my opinion is that the glue just doesn't stay long enough. You can't do any cool weapon combos because by the time you pull out the other weapons, the glue's gone, kind of locking you into using it unless you dump massive amounts of ammo to lock down one monster. The immobilization also doesn't even work on monsters with movement attacks. The Werewolf's Lunge and Bigfoot's Stomps can still be used even when they're stuck. Because the glue is purely grounded, every single flying monster in the game will laugh at you if you try to use it. The flammability is cool, but it's more of a gimmick that you can't really utilize unless you pack Molotovs. And they aren't even that good, so most people don't. And it also doesn't help that some monsters are immune to fire. It's a complete joke of a weapon. F tier. My thoughts on the Boomerang are like the CD launcher in that I'm very surprised how good it turned out to be after I seriously gave it a shot. It works by holding down the fire button, and if you look at an enemy, you lock onto them. When it's released, it will fly to any locked on monster, which can be up to, I believe, 5. And it'll damage them, and then come back, damaging them twice. This weapon is insanely easy to use, as you don't need to aim, you just need to look at them. You don't even need to look at them for a long period of time, just a quick flick to them will lock them on. The damage is very good, as it gains more damage the more monsters are chained, with very impressive range. It can lock onto monsters nearly across the entire arena of the biggest monster fest in the game. The ammo efficiency is also very good, as it only uses 15 ammo per shot, and doesn't use more ammo if more monsters are chained, meaning you can go very long periods of time without having to restock and still be completely fine. It can also attack more monsters even if they aren't locked on. As long as they're in the path of the boomerang, it will damage them. It's just solid and good. There's no gimmicks holding it back. There's no really bad crowd controls. It has really good crowd control. The downsides is that it's pretty inconsistent and medium weight. At longer ranges, the boomerang will often fall out and not deal damage twice. It'll only damage them once, and this can even happen at shorter ranges. I believe this really holds it back at dealing with singular enemies, as you'll only be able to damage them once. You can only damage twice on chained enemies. Overall, it's solid, easy to use, and very strong, and I'm decently surprised. A tier. The B minor is, well, it's certainly a weapon. It's often regarded as one of the worst weapons in the game, and after I've played with it, I can definitely say that is very true. This weapon is just completely awful. When shot, it launches a beehive a short distance away, and when a monster comes into range, it'll jump to them and explode. This weapon is very easy to use, as you can just spam it with the very quick fire rate it has. And it actually has pretty good damage, surprisingly. However, the crushing downsides it has completely ruins the weapon. The most notable one is that it has a unique weight class in that it's the heaviest weapon in the game. Most likely a carryover from earlier builds of the game. It's the only weapon to retain its weight from unpatched or even the pre-release. Because of this, you can't be mobile with it, and in a game where you're constantly encouraged to keep moving, and that is very true, you must stay moving in this game to survive, it's very self-sabotagey in that regard. Because it's explosive, of course, you will deal self-damage with this, and it's because you need to be very close up, because most monsters will come to you. So just shooting it, spamming it, you'll often just damage yourself. And this is a personal note, but I find it just so boring to use. There's nothing flashy, all you do is just spam the fire button, and it does the work for you. You don't do any strafing, you don't do any movement, ranged attacks, no. You just sit there and spam, and it does the work for you. That is obscenely boring to me, and I could never get behind this gun. There's not much more to say. It's just bad. F tier. The railgun is a weapon I used to like, but after using it, I found it to be completely awful and miserable to use. It's obscenely clunky, even more so than the grenade slingshot. It works that when you hold the fire button, it charges a shot, which unlike every single other charge weapon in the game, it slows you to a crawl, and when fired, it releases a giant hit scan shot that pierces all walls while having a giant hitbox. When the button is tapped, it makes you hold it for a few seconds before firing, forcing you to deal with the slow movement every single time you shoot it. It has good damage and the piercing is nice at times, but there's a mountain of downsides that drag all of the praise down. It's a heavy weapon, which does not help how slow you have to be when playing with the thing. The slow movement of the charge is really what kills the entire weapon. You're essentially immobile. The fact you're forced to deal with that movement every single time you use the gun makes it completely miserable to use, and not fun whatsoever. Another factor is the game's auto-target. It pierces enemies, but if a monster gets too close, the game tries to automatically aim at that monster, which makes you shoot into the floor, wasting a perfect piercing shot. It has a long reload that you, of course, would rather skip, but the gun also makes the instant reload glitch clunky to use as well. Because it shoots the entire clip at once, it always tries to auto-reload. If you try to use the glitch here, sometimes it won't work, and sometimes you'll get it off. For a gun that is so reliant on the glitch, it really doesn't like to work with you. I just hate using this weapon so much. The only saving grace it has is that it's the best gun in multiplayer PvP. C tier. The Radioactive Flashlight is the absolute king of monster madness. There's not enough words to describe how absolutely amazing this gun is, but I like to say that it just plays the game insanely well. It feels like it was tailor-made perfectly to every detail to excel in this game. This weapon perfectly fits the fast-paced run-and-gun playstyle that excels in this game, and honestly, feels like it makes the game too easy. I like to compare it to fighting game top tiers. Take Kakyoin and JoJo Heritage for the Future, and Yun and Street Fighter 3 Third Strike for examples. These characters are top tiers in their respective games, and what they have in common is that they can all play their games really, really well. Kakyoin has full screen dashes that let him abuse his low startup moves, mega disjoints, and range. His net special move invalidates half the roster and gives him 50 to 80% damage combos for free. Gun in Third Strike has mega corner carry on almost all his moves, a command grab letting him get full combos, and Ganejin. Which, if he opens you up, that is a clean Half-Life combo, and he builds a little meter for the next Ganejin if he uses an Ender. The Flashlight is similar in that it being lightweight and having damage that shreds every single monster in the game lets you run around without penalty, killing every monster in seconds. Or, in this analogy, letting you play your game extremely well, without any flaws. It has such a low time to kill, it has built-in crowd control, as just strafing with the flashlight destroys crowds of even tanky monsters. The damage this weapon outputs is very slightly worse than the minigun, as it doesn't have the same kind of fire rate, but it makes up for it in speed and versatility. Ammo isn't an issue here, as like the minigun, you'll kill everything without spending much ammo per monster. Realistically, the only two issues the flashlight has is that it can't snipe like the hit scan weapons. But then again, nothing in this game is long range enough to warrant that anyway, and if there's something out of reach, you can most of the time just sprint or dodge to it. The other problem is that you need to be very close up for max damage, putting yourself very much in harm's way. This can definitely get you killed at times and have you take a lot of damage, but taking damage is more than worth it to get in range for the flashlight damage. Using it for one level will just prove how amazing it is. Not much more needs to be said. S tier. Zack's melee is alright. As it's a melee weapon, it's outclassed by literally everything else. How melee weapons in this game work is that the 4 characters have their own unique melee weapon that can all do a unique special move. Universally, by attacking monsters, you fill up a meter that can be spent to consume all of it for a special move. Zack's has him rise into the air for a moment and slam down, dealing an AoE attack with very good burst damage. This attack can clear rooms with low-level monsters very easily, assuming you live long enough to even use it. The universal problem with melee weapons is that they're very bad and very unviable. It's because they're outclassed in every single way by ranged weapons and are largely unviable by as soon as level 3. Trying to use one will very likely get you killed for absolutely no reward whatsoever. And of course, every single flying enemy just completely invalidates the existence of melee weapons. Because you have to be so up close, and unlike the flashlight, you're not dealing any sort of significant damage to get the pressure off you while you're playing so close up, you'll very often get shredded for even trying to use a melee weapon, which is mostly their big problem. Zack's super being AoE is nice, but it has the slowest startup of all of the supers. This leaves you very susceptible to stuns, which will cancel the super entirely and not refund you any meter. It does have a lot of a tight attached to it, so it's one of the few that can deal with flying enemies somewhat, and while it's alright, the problem is basically that it's just a melee weapon. B tier. Carrie's melee is very much a step up from Zack's. As we've gotten all the universal stuff about melees out of the way with Zack, we'll solely be focusing on supers from now on. It's actually a very good super, honestly the best one in the game for sure. It's the quickest super to start up by far, and while you can be stunned out of it, it's rare to happen and mostly a non-issue. It quickly teleports you to the nearest enemy and slashes them, dealing a good amount of damage and leaving you point blank, which is very nice. Super also works as mobility and has a small effect of being able to be buffered. If you hold the fire button, the super will unleash the frame an enemy comes into range of it. However, the super has a nasty habit to whiff on enemies that are quick, wasting it completely and leaving you point blank in front of enemies that took no damage from it. Unfortunately, it's a good attack, but it's just locked behind the poor fate of being a melee weapon. B tier. Andy's melee is very different from the previous 2 melees, as it doesn't deal burst damage. When the super is used, you'll start spinning around and have full mobility. Any monsters you come into contact with will take a small portion of damage. It's really trying to be crowd control, but the mediocre damage just does not help that whatsoever. The full mobility is nice, but it's mostly a gimmick, as you don't get a speed boost or any sort of buff to help with that. All you can do is just dodge and run. Running isn't a very good idea, as it kills your turn mobility, and ending a run while the super is active essentially nullifies the super and leaves you a sitting duck. The biggest flaw in my opinion is that you don't get knockback immunity while it's active. Considering you need to be right up to an enemy and constantly moving in order to reliably do any damage, thanks to it not being burst damage, being knocked around significantly is extremely common and completely kills your damage potential. Damage potential that is already pretty inconsistent. Sometimes it'll 3-shot an enemy or 1-shot an enemy, there's no telling. It's just really bad. Avoid that melee. It will get you killed. C tier. Jennifer's melee is just about as bad as Andy's. It also isn't a burst damage super, working by keeping Jennifer in place, spinning around while having a magnet effect, dragging monsters to you alongside destructible objects. This super is very underwhelming. At the very least, you do get knockback immunity, so I suppose that's nice. And it has pretty good damage actually, but that's about the only upside it has. It doesn't stun monsters or anything, so unless it kills the monsters you're pulling in, they will be fully active and completely wailing on you while you're completely defenseless. This makes it actively self-sabotaging, as you're just taking free damage that you can't do anything about because your super just cannot do the damage it needs to kill those tankier monsters. Also, this is somewhat specific, but if you use it near an explosive zombie, you can and will pull in the dynamite they throw and then eat a full explosion to the face. Overall, it's not good and probably the worst melee considering how defenseless it leaves you. At least with Andy's you can move around. C tier. Alright, now we're moving on to the Madness melee weapons. These are somewhat similar to the normal melee weapons, but they're also drastically different. These are 4 melee weapons, one for each character, that you can only get on the hardest difficulty, Madness, on the last level of the game. Universally, these deal more damage, have some special visual effects, charge the super faster, and are generally stronger in almost every single way. So starting off the next 4 entries is Mjolnir. This is obviously based off of Thor's hammer and sports some really cool looking lightning effects, and changes the basic attack by giving it extreme knockback. The super also visually looks like you're smiting monsters, which is actually a really cool thing to think about. It's very solid, but although these weapons are powerful, they all share the same problem normal melee weapons do, is that they're still melee weapons. You still need to be really close, you still get trumped by flying enemies, and doesn't help that ranged weapons are still better in every way. The knockback on hit is extremely annoying. Obviously you don't want to launch monsters away from you. The melee weapon, you want them to be as close to you as possible. It makes it annoying to use, but it's still very strong and viable though. A tier. The Black Dragon Sword is the second best of the Madness melees and is Carrie's unique weapon. It has a lot of things going for it, visually and gameplay wise. It's the second best Madness weapon, with many attributes to absolutely make it dominate almost every monster in the game. It's a jagged sword with an eye near the hilt that is coated in a purple glow, which looks really nice. When you hit a monster, it features a mini effect version of Carrie's super, which also gives it the best melee damage in the game based off the basic attack. Every other Madness melee cannot match the damage this thing can do. It builds your super meter criminally fast. It only takes about 3 hits in order to get a super going, which is absolutely disgusting thinking about how good Carrie's super is already. And if that wasn't enough, every subsequent hit on monsters will increase your swing speed, letting you completely tear through hordes if they happen to come near you. Of course, this heavily encourages you to get in there, hit, spam super a disgusting amount of times and walk through almost any enemy. This super gain probably makes it the best melee weapon to handle flying enemies, as long as you can get a few hits you can target the flying enemies. Really, this melee has no specific weakness outside of being a melee weapon. All of the effects are amazing and busted in practice. There's one other melee above it which we'll get to soon, but this melee definitely deserves an S tier. The Bruce Lee Nunchucks is the name of Jennifer's Madness melee. It's also commonly called the Flaming Nunchucks, but I'll just be calling it Nunchucks for here. These are one of 2 broken melee weapons that it's not mechanically broken, but it's literally broken, as it's straight up not on the map and cannot be collected in normal gameplay. It took 16 years, but it was eventually fixed by using modding tools to replace another melee on the map with them. finally letting us play with these nunchucks outside of grave danger. These are definitely stronger than her normal melee, there's no doubt about that, but still retain the same problem the super has. Visually, these are two red nunchucks with a topped off with a golden dragon coiling around them, which looks very nice up close. The unique attribute of these are that it's coated in fire on hit, engulfing every monster and spreading it around like crazy. Its basic attack also has a tornado effect applied to it that pulls objects to you, but I don't think it pulls monsters in, although that would be really nice. The super still has the same problem her normal melee has, in that you're stun susceptible and defenseless, but arguably it's worse than her normal super in a couple aspects. The super does more damage obviously, but she spins very quick and it does not last nearly as long. The most detrimental feature is that it's bugged to the point where it will stop the animation of her spinning and doing damage, but it won't give you control back for a few seconds. Meaning quite literally, you have to hold free damage that the enemies are hitting you with, and you cannot do a single thing about it. You are quite literally getting punished for using the super, and in most cases it's probably best that you don't use the super because of that. It's very solid, but that bug just hurts it so much. A tier. The Reaper Scythe is the Mac Daddy of the Madness melees, and surprisingly, the community only uncovered how insanely and ridiculously overpowered this thing is because it was broken. Yep, that means 2 of the 4 Madness melees were completely broken and could not be used. Jennifer's because it was unobtainable, and Andy's because every time you try to hit an enemy with it, the game would crash. This crash is also rumored to be able to correct your save file, so that's a big ouch if that's true, although I have no proof of that. This crash actually happens because the game tries to call for a corrupted particle that is known as soul dust. Obviously the particle's corrupted, so when it tries to load it, the game freaks out and crashes. So for 16 years, it pretty much just laid there in inventories as you could not use it at all, and nobody knew what it did. But after it was found out that this particle is the cause for the crash, it was actually rather easily fixed. If you're on the PC version, you can just enable console commands and run a kill particles command, and there you go. The game won't load any particles, it means it won't load soul dust, meaning the melee is usable. Or, and this also works on Xboxes or Xenia, you can just straight up delete the particle from the game, and there you go, it just works. Perfect. Now, after it was unleashed after all this time, we found it was more than worth the wait to get our hands on this, as it is absolutely one of the most busted weapons legitimately obtainable in the game. It's a scythe with an orange ball on top. There's not much visual flair going on here, and not much to talk about in that regard, as of course all the visual stuff had to be removed to make it work, but the effect it does is absolutely insane. It has vampirism, restoring 10% of your HP, and this is the crazy part, on hit. Not on kill, on hit. This is pretty much free health for absolutely no cost to you at all. And the super does not change at all besides giving you the vampirism on hit, which is really good as you have a very mobile AoE attack to constantly get vampirism off. Now restoring your health is always good, but what makes it so broken? Wouldn't it just restore you to 100% health and then you're done? No. Not at all, because this lets you go to 110% health, and then you can keep going until 150% health, and then you can go to 300% health, and then 500, and then 1000% health, and you get it here. You can infinitely stack and get overhealth to pretty much infinity, as much as you want. This means it is obscenely broken in the strategy that you can just farm health off of lower tier monsters and then run through the entire level with no care in the world because literally nothing can touch you. It makes Madness a complete joke, as long as you can set it up, you are completely golden. You are completely invincible, and it's the only reason I got to wave 100 on Dojo in my other video. It is unbelievably busted what this can do to you. Even if you can farm enough HP, you can survive the Billy one-shot, as it only does 1000% health. So yeah, this melee is so utterly broken. I mean, it just gives you immortality. As long as you can set it up, you just have complete immortality. Like, eventually, if you're stupid with it, you can get diminishing returns, but if you're not, then shit, immortality, just like that. No questions need to be asked here, man. S tier. The chainsaw is a rather unorthodox weapon, as it's kind of not a weapon, it's more of an object you can pick up, but it has enough unique qualities for me to warrant to consider it in its own weapon. It has an unused weapon icon that I kind of wanted to use. How it works is that when you pick it up, there's a 100% fuel counter that goes down when used until it hits 0. When it's 0, you just swing it like a normal melee weapon, and it's pretty much just a huge paperweight. But while holding it, you gain the fastest move speed achievable without items, and gives you the quickest dodge in the game without glitches or items. Surprisingly, it has very good damage, being able to shred even tanky enemies like Fat Zombie very quick. And by extension, if you can ration your fuel well, you can shred through entire Monster Fest quite literally with this thing. The downside is that, of course, when there's no fuel, it's pretty much useless. And you have to use it very sparingly, as you do not want to waste fuel. You can't fight any extra enemies with this thing, as you'll need to save the fuel for the necessary combat encounters to get through the level. And it's only obtainable on levels 2, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, without cheats. And it's completely redundant in 9 and 13. However, the damage and speed make it actually pretty viable if you can get your hands on it. So maybe the next time you kill Billy, pick it up. B tier. Fists are, well, I mean, they're fists. They're only accessible if you have no guns or melee weapons, which is actually impossible, because if you go into a level with nothing, you'll always get a melee from level 2 and nail guns, making it only usable on your very first time playing level 1 and the first half of level 10. But technically, you can make it all of level 10 if you use a glitch, but yada yada. There is no upsides in using them, and they are only detrimental. If you press the attack button 4 times in succession, you'll throw 3 very weak punches that can barely even kill 1 zombie. And the 4th is the biggest problem with them. The fourth attack always throws a punch or kick that has a pretty funny animation that is actually filled with a lot of personality about the characters. It completely locks you in place, which will always get you killed. Because you need to be point blank and you already struggle killing zombies, you won't get anything done. My conclusion? Just pick up the melee, don't try to be different. F tier. The final weapon to round out this tier list is the Hand of God. It's more akin to those old videos of the TF2 Valve weapons, you've seen them, where they're going crazy in servers with completely busted weapons. It's basically the Monster Madness equivalent of that, and it's the best thing to ever be made in the Monster Madness franchise. It's a dev weapon that, assumingly, we're not supposed to have access to, as long as, the customer doesn't know how to use Notepad. By setting one string to true, you gain access to console commands, which open up the game a very big number of ways to play, but importantly here, this lets you use the dev weapon. By popping open the console and typing God, you obviously get God mode, and the Hand of God weapon. This weapon kills every monster on the map, doesn't use any ammo, and gives you the quickest move speed in the game, even quicker than the chainsaw. You can fall asleep, get high as hell, get drunk. As long as you can click mouse 1, you'll pretty much just win forever. It even kills bosses immediately in one shot, no matter what. And if you complete a level, you get to keep the Hand of God, which, well, I mean, there's not much to say about it. It's good for testing things for sure, which, is the point, but, I mean, there's just not much to say. You just instant kill everything. Except Mr. Huggles, of course. Final rating, 1 Monster Madillion S tier out of 10. Thank you for watching, and as you can probably tell if you watch my old videos, I finally got a mic so I can make this video in the first place. I've always wanted to make it for a while, but now that I have this baby, we're in business. Expect more Monster Madness content from me, hopefully. Big shoutouts go to the Monster Madness Discord for inspiration for this video. Shout out to Larry_Sway777 for inspiring this video with his level ranking video. And shout out to Max for fixing the Reaper Scythe and the Nunchucks, alongside finding console commands. Remember to join the Monster Madness Discord, link in the pinned comment, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.